Kale had always believed in following the rules. He grew up in a small, disciplined settlement on the edge of human-controlled space, where order and obedience were considered the foundation of survival. From childhood, he was taught the same lessons again and again. War was dangerous. The enemy could never be trusted. Mercy could get you killed. But on that morning, everything Kale believed was about to be challenged. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon when the emergency alarms screamed through the village. The warning systems detected an incoming strike, another attack in the endless conflict between humanity and an alien civilization. Kale was already on patrol with his unit. His soldiers moved carefully along the dusty paths that cut through the surrounding hills and forests. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke and burning metal, a constant reminder that their world was never truly safe. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could mean death. As the patrol advanced, Kale suddenly noticed movement near the remains of a partially collapsed building. At first, he assumed it was nothing more than loose debris shifting in the wind. Then he saw them, small figures, children. They were huddled together in the ruins, their terrified faces covered in dust, their eyes wide with fear. They couldn't have been older than 10 or 12 years old. Kale stopped breathing for a moment, because they weren't human. They were the enemy's children. His grip tightened around his weapon as his training fought against what he was seeing. These were supposed to be the creatures he had been taught to fear, the ones on the other side, the ones he had prepared his entire life to fight. But standing there in front of him were not soldiers, not monsters. Just frightened children trying to survive. And for the first time, Kale wondered if everything he had been told was wrong. The rules were clear. Never approach the enemy. Never risk yourself for them. Yet, when he looked into their frightened eyes, Kale felt something he could not ignore. His mind raced. If he left them there, they would almost certainly die in the next wave of attacks. And yet, if he helped them, he risked his life and the anger of his commanders. Every instinct told him to move on, to focus on his own safety and the mission. But another voice, a quieter, stronger one, whispered inside him, "You cannot let them die." He stepped closer, careful to stay out of sight, scanning the area for patrols or drones that might spot him. The children were shaking, holding each other, whispering in a language he did not understand. One little girl clutched a worn toy, her eyes wide with fear, while a boy tried to comfort her, though he himself was trembling. Kale took a deep breath and made his decision. Slowly, he moved toward the building, crouching low, keeping his movements deliberate and careful. He whispered softly, hoping that the sound of his voice would not startle them too much. To his surprise, the children looked up at him, their fear mixed with confusion. One of the boys pointed at him, unsure whether he was a threat. Kale held up his hands, showing that he meant no harm. He could see the tension in their small bodies, the way their eyes darted around searching for safety. It was in that moment that Kale realized how fragile life was, and how quickly fear could consume even the youngest hearts. He motioned for them to follow him, and after a tense pause, they did. The journey to safety was perilous. Kale had to navigate through crumbling buildings, dodge patrols, and avoid detection from overhead sensors. Every step was filled with anxiety, every sound of distant footsteps or explosions making his heart jump. Yet as he led them, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than any fear. He spoke softly, using gestures to guide them, encouraging them to keep moving. The children began to trust him, their small hands holding on to his as they moved through the ruins. Hours passed, and Kale finally found a safe place, an abandoned shelter that had once been used for storage. It was not much, but it offered protection from the chaos outside. He settled the children inside, checking that none were injured. One girl had a small scrape on her knee, another boy had a bruise on his forehead, but otherwise they were unharmed. Kale gave them some water from his supply and shared the small amount of food he had. The children looked at him with cautious curiosity, trying to understand why a human would help them. Kale did not have the words to explain it fully. He simply offered what he could: a safe place, a bit of food, and a promise that he would not leave them. As night fell, Kyle kept watch, listening to the distant sounds of conflict. He knew that staying in one place for too long was dangerous, but he also could not abandon the children. In the quiet moments, he thought about his own childhood, about the moments when someone had helped him, guided him, and shown him kindness. He realized that what he was doing now was not just about saving lives. It was about showing that even in a world torn by war, compassion could exist. Among the children was Lyra, a young girl with eyes that seemed older than her years. She watched Kale carefully, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he moved, and the gentle way he spoke to them. Even in the midst of fear, she sensed that he was different from the others. She did not understand why a human would risk everything for them, but she felt a strange sense of trust growing inside her. That trust, fragile as it was, would later become the foundation for a bond that neither side could ignore. Kale did not speak much that night. He sat near the entrance of the shelter, listening to the soft breaths of the children as they fell asleep. He thought about the danger outside, about the mission he had been assigned, and about the consequences he might face for his actions. Yet none of that mattered as much as the lives before him. In that moment, he understood something fundamental. Courage was not just about fighting or winning battles. It was about making choices when every option carried risk, about standing up for what was right, even when the world expected you to do otherwise. By dawn, Kale had made a plan. He would find a way to get the children to a safer area, a place where they could be cared for without fear of immediate danger. He knew it would not be easy, and he knew that some people would call him a traitor, a fool, or worse. But he also knew that he could not turn back. The memory of the children's frightened faces, their silent trust in his guidance, would stay with him forever. And in the quiet, hidden moments of that war-torn morning, a small spark of hope had been lit. One that had the power to change lives, to challenge hatred, and to remind everyone that even in a world filled with conflict, humanity could endure. Kale's choice that day marked the beginning of a story that would ripple far beyond the ruins of that small village. A story of bravery, compassion, and an unexpected connection between worlds that were meant to be enemies. And for LRA, the young girl who had witnessed a human's courage, that day would be the first memory she would carry forever. A memory that would shape her heart and the choices she would make in the years to come. Months had passed since Kale had risked his life to save the enemy children. The memory of that day stayed with him like a shadow, sometimes comforting, sometimes haunting. Life in the village continued, but it was never the same. War had a way of leaving scars that no one could see, and Kyle carried his quietly. He returned to his duties, patrolling the outskirts, assisting in missions, and following orders carefully. Yet in every quiet moment, his thoughts drifted back to the children he had saved, wondering if they had survived, if they were safe, and if the world around them had changed. On the other side of the conflict, Lyra had grown in both strength and curiosity. The girl, who had once been terrified of the world around her, was learning to navigate it with quiet determination. Her mother, a respected leader, had kept her closely monitored, aware that the humans could not be trusted. Yet, in the privacy of her thoughts, Lyra remembered the human who had saved her and the others that day. She remembered the way he had moved, the care in his actions, and the simple kindness that had defied the hatred surrounding them. That memory became a secret treasure, something she clung to during the difficult times of recovery and training. In her alien society, it was during a neutral zone gathering that fate decided to bring them together again. Kale was assigned to oversee a temporary exchange of supplies, a mission that required careful negotiation and communication with the enemy. The neutral zone was a small, barren stretch of land where neither side could claim complete control. The air was tense, filled with the quiet hum of machinery, the occasional whisper of voices, and the distant echo of soldiers moving along the perimeter. Kale moved cautiously, scanning the area, his senses alert for any sign of trouble. And then he saw her, Lyra, taller now, more confident, yet unmistakably the same girl he had rescued months ago. She was with a small delegation, her eyes scanning the area with the sharpness of someone who had learned to survive in a world full of threats. Their eyes met across the open space, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Recognition passed silently between them, and a wave of memories flooded back. The fear, the rescue, the small acts of trust that had bound them in that dangerous moment. Kyle approached slowly, careful not to startle her. He kept his hands visible, signaling that he meant no harm. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, a mixture of caution and curiosity, but she did not turn away. The distance between them seemed smaller than it actually was, as if the invisible bond from that fateful day had stretched across the months and held them together. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but steady. "Lyra, it's you." She nodded slightly, a quiet acknowledgement. "I remember you," she said simply. Her tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of emotion she could not completely hide. Kyle felt a strange mixture of relief and nervousness. Neither of them could predict what this encounter would lead to, but both sensed that something important was about to unfold. Their first conversation was careful, full of pauses and measured words. Kale wanted to understand how she had survived, how she was faring, and what had changed her. Despite the tension, a quiet connection began to form. Kale noticed the small gestures, the way Lyra's eyes softened when she spoke of her younger siblings, the subtle way she watched for danger even in neutral spaces, the way she seemed to carry the weight of her experiences without complaint. Lyra noticed Kyle's careful movements, his unwavering calm in the face of uncertainty, and the genuine concern he showed for those around him. Each observation built a deeper understanding between them, a silent recognition that neither side was simply enemy or ally. They were individuals shaped by circumstances capable of choices that defied expectation. As days turned into weeks, Kale and Lyra found themselves crossing paths more often. Their meetings were brief, often under the cover of routine missions or during supply exchanges. Each encounter allowed them to share small stories, learn about each other's lives, and navigate the subtle complexities of trust. Kyle spoke of his home, of the people who had trained him, and of the moral dilemmas he faced in a world that demanded obedience but offered no clear answers. Lyra shared her experiences growing up under her mother's strict guidance, the lessons of survival, and the quiet rebellion of hope she carried in her heart. Through these conversations, both began to understand the humanity in the other. Kale realized that the enemy was not a faceless threat, but individuals with dreams, fears, and values as real as his own. Lyra realized that humans, despite the damage caused by war, could act with courage and compassion, challenging the beliefs she had been taught since childhood. This mutual understanding created a fragile but growing bridge between them, one that neither could ignore, even as the world around them remained filled with tension and suspicion. There were moments of silence as well where words were unnecessary. A shared glance, a small gesture, or the quiet presence of one another spoke volumes. Both were learning patience, the importance of observation, and the subtle art of navigating relationships in a world divided by conflict. And beneath it all, a quiet sense of trust began to grow, a trust that had been planted during that rescue and nurtured through careful, deliberate interactions. Yet, despite the connection, caution remained. Kyle knew that any misstep could put them both at risk. Lyra knew that her mother would not approve of these interactions, that danger lurked in every corner, and that their growing bond could be seen as a threat by those around them. Every decision, every movement was measured against the backdrop of war, suspicion, and responsibility. And still neither could deny the pull that drew them together, the memory of a shared moment of courage, the recognition of compassion, and the unspoken understanding that perhaps they were meant to challenge the divisions between their worlds. By the end of those weeks, Kale and Lyra had built a foundation of cautious trust and mutual respect. They were no longer just rescuer and rescued, but individuals who had begun to see the world through each other's eyes. And while the road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, dangers, and difficult choices, both understood that the connection they had found was worth protecting. It was a fragile, tentative bond, but it was real, and sometimes in a world torn apart by conflict, the smallest sparks of trust could light the way to a future neither side had imagined. Kale had never expected to meet Lyra's mother, He knew that the young girl's family held power, but he had only ever heard stories, rumors of a leader who was strict, protective, and unyielding. The first time he entered her domain, he felt a weight pressing down on him, a tension that made his chest tighten. Everything around him was unfamiliar. Alien architecture, strange symbols carved into walls, and an air that seemed charged with authority and expectation. He could sense that every step he took was being observed, measured, and judged. LRA's mother was exactly as the stories had suggested. She stood tall, her presence commanding the room, her eyes sharp and intelligent. Her posture alone suggested that she had seen countless conflicts, had made difficult decisions, and had survived where others might have faltered. When she first looked at Kale, her gaze pierced through him, assessing his intentions, his character, and his worth. Kyle could feel her evaluating every detail, his clothes, the way he held himself, even the faint tension in his shoulders. It was the kind of scrutiny that made him want to speak cautiously, weigh every word, and prove that he was not a threat. Lyra stepped beside him, her hand brushing his lightly in a silent reassurance. "Mother," she said, her voice calm but firm, "this is Kale. He helped us when we needed it most. He saved lives that day." Her mother's eyes narrowed, focusing intently on Kale. "I have heard of your actions," she said slowly, her tone steady but not hostile. "But stories are easy to manipulate. Actions speak louder, and saving lives is only part of the picture. How can I trust a human?" Knowing the history between our peoples, Kyle swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. He knew she was right. The world they lived in was shaped by conflict, by suspicion, and by centuries of misunderstandings. Trust was not given lightly, especially not to someone who had grown up on the other side of a war. Yet, he also knew that he had to try. "I had no choice," he said honestly. "I saw children in danger. I could not walk away. I do not ask for trust, only understanding. I acted with compassion because it was the right thing to do, not for reward or recognition." Her mother studied him, her eyes searching for any hint of deceit, any sign of hidden motives. Kyle could feel the room growing smaller, the air heavier with tension. Lyra's mother had been trained to see weakness, to detect lies, and to make decisions that protected her family and her people. And yet, as the moments stretched, Kyle realized that there was also a sense of respect in her gaze, a recognition that courage and morality sometimes crossed the boundaries of culture and race. Despite her cautious demeanor, she was also deeply protective. "You understand the risk of this interaction, do you not?" she asked, her voice softening slightly, though her eyes remained watchful. "Every connection between you could bring danger to you, to her, and to all those under my care. One mistake could cost lives. Why should I allow this, Kyle?" Kyle met her eyes steadily. "Because I cannot ignore what I know is right," he replied. "Because children should be safe no matter which side they belong to. And because I believe that even in the midst of war, people can choose compassion over conflict." His words were simple, but they carried conviction. He knew they might not be enough to change her mind immediately, but he also knew that honesty and integrity were the only tools he had in this unfamiliar world. Lyra's mother remained silent for a long moment, her eyes scanning Kyle as if trying to measure the weight of his soul. Lyra stood close, her hand lightly touching her mother's arm, a silent plea for understanding. Kale noticed the subtle shift. The daughter's faith in him was unshakable, even when her mother's caution loomed like a wall. That faith, quiet but strong, gave him a sense of hope that he could not have anticipated. Finally, her mother spoke, her tone steady but edged with caution. "I cannot simply approve of this relationship," she said. "Not yet. You have shown courage, and you have saved lives, but the world is dangerous. I have a responsibility to protect my daughter and my people. If anything were to happen because of your connection, it would be my failure as much as yours." Kyle nodded, understanding the depth of her concern. He could not argue with her logic. It was sound, yet he also felt a quiet determination rising within him. "I understand," he said. "I do not expect permission. I only wish to prove through my actions that I can be trusted, that my intentions are true, and that my respect for her and for your people is real." Lyra's mother studied him for another long moment. She had seen many humans, many attempts at connection that ended in betrayal. Yet Kale's calm sincerity, his willingness to accept her judgment without defensiveness, seemed different. It was not arrogance or bravado. It was quiet strength, tempered by understanding. She realized that he had not come seeking power or advantage. He had come because he believed in doing the right thing, even when it was risky. After what felt like hours, her expression softened just slightly, a hint of acknowledgement. "I will watch," she said quietly. "I will allow this, but under careful observation. Any misstep and the consequences will be severe. You must understand this." Kyle nodded again, grateful for even this cautious permission. It was not full trust, but it was a start, a recognition that his actions mattered and that he had the chance to prove himself in ways that words alone could not accomplish. Lyra's eyes shone with relief and quiet gratitude. She knew her mother's approval, even limited, was significant. It meant that Kale had been seen, truly seen for who he was, not just as a human, but as someone capable of courage, compassion, and integrity. And in that moment, a subtle shift occurred, one that would influence the delicate balance between trust, caution, and connection in the days to come. Kale left that meeting with a mixture of relief, respect, and renewed determination. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. Lyra's mother's watchful eyes were a constant reminder that any mistake could undo the fragile trust that had been built. Yet he also knew that he had taken the first step toward understanding, toward bridging the gap between worlds, and toward creating a connection that could survive even the harshest scrutiny. In the quiet aftermath, Kale and Lyra walked together briefly, exchanging small smiles and words of encouragement. The world outside remained dangerous, filled with conflict and uncertainty, but for a brief moment there was hope. Hope that courage and compassion could matter, that trust could grow, and that the boundaries set by war might be challenged by acts of integrity and humanity. That hope, fragile but undeniable, would guide them in the trials yet to come. The world around Kale had become more complicated. What had started as a single act of courage, saving enemy children, had grown into a connection that both fascinated and tested him every day. Despite the cautious permission from Lyra's mother, danger was never far away. Both humans and aliens were suspicious of any interaction that crossed the line between the two sides. Rumors began to circulate about Kale's involvement with the alien girl, whispers that made his colleagues wary and even angry. He could feel their eyes on him during missions, their judgment heavy and silent. The word traitor was never spoken aloud, but it hung in the air like a shadow, and Kale knew that he was under constant scrutiny. At the same time, Lyra faced her own challenges. Her mother had allowed Kale to remain in proximity, but under strict observation. Every meeting, every conversation had to be cautious and discreet. Her family monitored her movements, her interactions, and even the smallest expressions that might betray her feelings. Lyra felt the weight of expectation pressing on her shoulders, knowing that one misstep could bring consequences not only to her, but also to Kale. The trust they had begun to build was fragile, delicate, and constantly at risk from the world around them. Despite these pressures, Kale and Lyra found ways to connect. Their meetings were brief, but meaningful in hidden corners of neutral zones, or during moments when duty allowed. They spoke quietly about their lives, their dreams, and the realities of the war-torn world they inhabited. Kyle learned more about Lyra's upbringing, her training, and the responsibility she bore as the daughter of a powerful leader. Lyra learned more about Kale's life among humans, the rules he had to follow, and the moral dilemmas he faced in every mission. Each conversation brought new understanding, revealing the depth of their courage, compassion, and resilience. Yet, it was not easy. Both sides tested them in ways that were unavoidable. Kale faced commanders who questioned his loyalty, colleagues who doubted his judgment, and situations that forced him to choose between duty and morality. Every time he hesitated to strike or refused to harm an enemy child, he risked reprimand or worse. He had to navigate a world where obedience was demanded, yet conscience called him to act differently. The tension created by these challenges sometimes left him exhausted, but he never wavered in his determination to do what he believed was right. Lyra, too, faced challenges of her own. Her mother's watchful eye never strayed, reminding her that she could not openly show trust or affection toward Kale. She had to learn patience, subtlety, and discretion. Every word she spoke, every movement she made, had to be considered carefully. She became adept at hiding emotions in plain sight, masking concern or care with politeness and routine behavior. Even when she wanted to reach out to Kyle, she had to wait for moments when observation was light or when chance allowed them to speak freely. The risk made their bond stronger in unexpected ways. Each meeting was precious, filled with unspoken understanding and careful gestures. Kale would offer advice or comfort, sometimes in the form of a quiet word, sometimes through protective action in dangerous situations. Lyra would respond with gratitude and subtle encouragement, learning to trust a human in ways her society often forbade. Together, they built a silent partnership, a connection grounded in shared values, courage, and a commitment to one another's safety. One evening, a new threat emerged. A patrol from Kale's side had discovered traces of the hidden meetings. Rumors had escalated into suspicion, and Kale was summoned for questioning. His heart raced as he faced commanders who demanded explanations, their voices harsh and accusatory. "Why are you associating with the enemy?" one officer asked, glaring at him. Kale held his ground, careful to explain only what he could. "I am acting to protect lives," he said firmly. "That is my responsibility as a human and as a soldier who believes in doing what is right. No harm has come from these actions." The questioning was intense, but Kale's calm honesty gradually shifted the tone. Some officers were unconvinced, but others began to see that his actions were guided by principles rather than rebellion. Still, the incident reinforced the reality that every choice carried consequences. One mistake could undo months of careful trust building. Kyle left the questioning with a renewed sense of caution and a determination to protect not only the Yao children he had saved, but also the bond he had begun to form with Lyra. Meanwhile, Lyra's mother increased her vigilance. She understood that Kale's presence was both an opportunity and a risk. She tested her daughter with subtle reminders of duty, cautioning her about the dangers of misplaced trust. Yet, even in these moments, she observed Kale quietly, noting his unwavering integrity, his careful respect for boundaries, and his consistent courage in difficult situations. She began to realize that the human who had once saved her daughter was not merely an outsider, but someone capable of genuine compassion and honor, a realization that challenged long-held beliefs about humans and the divisions between their worlds. Kyle and Lyra continued to meet in secret, often under the cover of routine missions or in brief moments when observation was light. Each encounter required careful planning, stealth, and patience. They exchanged small gifts, tokens of trust and understanding that carried significance far beyond their size. Sometimes it was a simple word of encouragement, a reminder to stay strong in the face of challenges, or a shared story that revealed their humanity to one another. These small moments became lifelines, strengthening their bond while teaching them the importance of subtlety, courage, and respect. Through these trials, Kale and Lyra learned valuable lessons. They discovered that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned through consistent actions and integrity. They understood that courage was not just about facing physical danger, but about standing up for principles, even when the world questioned or condemned them. And they realized that hope, even in a world filled with conflict, could survive when nurtured through careful, deliberate care. Despite the constant challenges, Kale's determination never wavered. He understood that every risk was worth it if it meant protecting the lives of those who could not protect themselves and fostering a connection that might someday bridge the gap between their peoples. Lyra's resilience matched her quiet strength, inspiring him to continue even when circumstances seemed overwhelming. Together they moved forward cautiously but deliberately, proving that courage and compassion could persist even in the harshest environments. By the end of this period, Kale and Lyra had strengthened their bond in ways neither had anticipated. The world around them remained dangerous and unpredictable, but their trust, understanding, and shared courage created a foundation that could endure even under scrutiny and pressure. They had learned that connection was not given lightly, that trust was fragile but powerful, and that even in the darkest times, acts of compassion and bravery could illuminate the path forward. The days that followed brought both tension and clarity. Kale had learned to navigate the delicate balance between duty, courage, and compassion, while Lyra had grown confident in her own ability to trust and act carefully. Their bond, once fragile and uncertain, had strengthened over months of careful observation, secret meetings, and shared experiences. But now the real test awaited them, the moment when Lyra's mother would truly see if Kale's actions matched his words and intentions. Lyra's mother had watched quietly for weeks, observing every interaction, every choice Kale made, and every way he treated her daughter and others around him. She had seen him protect the children, honor their needs, and face danger without hesitation. She had seen him act with integrity, honesty, and courage, even when those around him doubted him or labeled his choices as foolish. Slowly, she began to recognize something she had not expected. Kale's presence was not a threat. It was an opportunity, a chance to witness humanity at its best, and perhaps even to teach a lesson about trust, compassion, and bridging divides.